Hello everyone, and a sincere welcome to this special webinar on the promises and perils the latest generations of artificial intelligence will most likely pose for our science. My name is Jean-Claude Bergelman. I used to be the Professor of Open Science Policy at the University of Brussels, and I was in charge at the European Commission for Open Science and Open Data. At present, I am the Editor-in-Chief of the Frontiers Policy Labs. The ambition of the labs is to strengthen the connection between robust scientific research and informed policy making on the grand challenges for our planet. I believe that the latest evolutions in AI are such a cross-cutting challenge, as they are a game changer for how knowledge work in general and science in particular will be done. It is indeed very likely that the impact of AI and the large language models which underpin it will be of an order of magnitude bigger than what the internet did for the spread and production of knowledge and science when it emerged in the 70s. Hence, there is a growing need to get a grip, aka develop a policy, on the development of AI and the data they rely on. As a result, regulation is now a high priority in the policy and public agenda. Earlier this year, I published a piece on the Policy Lab site in which I proposed, to get a grip on data and AI, the creation of a global regulatory body, a kind of an international data and AI agency, in order to be able to have an instrument to regulate the development of AI systems and their underlying data. The rationale behind the establishment of such an agency, which is of course a thinking exercise, is similar to that of the International Atomic Energy Agency, to address fears about atomic energy, in this case AI, and its potential uses and abuses. Increasingly, similar voices are heard that plead in the same direction. Very recently, last week actually, Mustafa Suleyman and Eric Schmidt, respectively co-founder of Inflection and DeepMind and the former CEO of Google, argued for an IPPC type of approach to the policy making that AI needs. In this discussion, it is important to distinguish between the need for regulation and a ban of AI technology altogether. Actually, a ban is completely senseless, as AI tools and the data on which they are built have become fundamental building blocks of modern day society, making them a key asset for any country or human activity, very much like actually energy and energy use. This observation can be applied to science as well. Today's science is data-driven, and the potential benefits that AI offers to science are immense, as we will hear from our distinguished panelists. The panelists make the key point not to throw away the baby with the bathwater. AI has indeed, as will become clear during the discussion, the potential to make science even more pertinent and performant than ever. But the question is, of course, in order to develop a good policy, is to know how big the baby is and how much bathwater we can tolerate. I am therefore very pleased to introduce this webinar, as it presents a unique opportunity for a multidisciplinary conversation on how AI is currently influencing various fields of research and transforming our approach to science. By engaging in this dialogue, we will explore the ways in which AI can empower us to make a substantial impact on our world as a scientist. We will also get to hear from our distinguished panelists, who are all scientists at different stages of a scientific career, on what steps should be taken when it comes to regulating AI systems and the data they use. But before we begin, I would like to thank the Publishing Development Department at Frontiers for co-hosting this webinar with the Frontiers Policy Labs. I would also like to extend my gratitude to our very skillful moderator, Mathieu Denis, who is the head of the Center for Science Futures at the International Science Council, as well as to our panelists for their participation and for sharing their insights with us. Now, let's delve into what no doubt will be on our policy agenda for a few years to come, if not a few decades. How is AI changing the way scientific research is done? And what can we do to ensure AI best serves science in general?
Welcome, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be with you today and have an opportunity to engage with you on what is probably the most important, the hottest topic of the day in the world of science. As Rosella indicated, my name is Mathieu Denis, and I head a think tank of the International Science Council called the Center for Science Futures, which really explores where developments in science and in the organization of science are taking us in the future. Colleagues, in earlier this year, I think it was in May, there was an interesting piece posted on the Frontiers Policy Lab by the chief editor of the Policy Lab, Jean-Claude Bürgelmann, entitled "Getting a Grip on Data and Artificial Intelligence." And that piece generated a lot of response, different perspectives, different types of reactions. Essentially, what JC Bürgelmann was trying to do in that piece was to raise critical questions about the strategic goals that our societies should pursue with AI. And he stressed in this piece as well the importance of regulation and of an adequate regulation of AI moving forward. And so the webinar today continues that discussion, the discussion that was started in May earlier this year. We're going to be looking at the societal transformations that are already driven by AI, but we're going to approach the topic from the perspective of science and research, and trying to critically look at the ways in which AI is already changing science, already changing the way science is done and it's organized. And we're going to start looking at the kinds of responses that are required to ensure that AI serves science and not the opposite, not that science becomes the victims of become threatened by developments in AI that somehow we don't have any grip on. And to help us going through this discussion, we have 6 distinguished speakers with us today. We have Nova Ahmed, Professor of Computer Engineering at the North-South University in Bangladesh. We have Xiaomei Shen, Chief Editor of the journal Frontiers Journal in Research Metrics and Analytics. And Xiaomei is also Professor of Information Science at Drexel University in the States. Baron Mons, molecular biologist, Professor of Biosemantics at Leiden University in the Netherlands, and the president of CODATA, which is the Committee on Data of the International Science Council. We have Ruth Morgan, Professor of Crime and Forensic Science at University College London. Izuru Takewaki, Chief Editor of the journal Frontiers in Built Environment, as well as Professor of Structural Engineering at Kyoto Arts and Crafts University, Japan. And finally, Leslie Paul Thiele, Chief Editor of the journal Frontiers in Political Science and Professor of Political Theory at University of Florida. Thank you very much to all speakers in advance for your contributions today. Colleagues, our session today will last, as Rosella just indicated, 90 minutes. We will kickstart the discussion with, I'll ask a couple of questions to each of the speakers. And that's a way of, warming up, kickstart our reflections, our joint reflections today. And then we will turn to the audience for questions. The Q&A session will be monitored. The only way you have to raise questions and put questions to our speakers is via the Q&A function that you will see at the bottom of your screen. Bear in mind that we have already received a good number of questions in preparation for this. As the audience, as participants were registering, they also had the opportunity to raise questions. So we already have some questions that were put to us. And so apologies in advance if some of your questions today are not being addressed. So let me, without waiting longer, let me turn to Nova, Baron, Ruth, Izuru, and Leslie first. And I would ask each of you the same 2 questions as to start today. One question is, I would like for you to give us a sense of how artificial intelligence is already changing your field of research. So any trends that you're already seeing in your own field of research, opportunities, but also challenges. Maybe address also the promises on the one hand versus the hype on the other. We're reading a lot of things about AI, and sometimes the promises are not there yet. So that would be the first question, just telling us about a sense of how AI is already impacting your own field of research. And my second question to you would be for you to tell us, when you think about AI and how AI is transforming research, what are the critical issues, the one or two critical issues that you think should be addressed as priorities, or at least should not be forgotten in the discussion? And that will help us also maybe start framing our discussion today and our discussions moving forward, possibly in the future. So Nova, can I first turn to you and ask you to give us your thoughts on these first two questions, please?
Okay, sure. So I teach computer science as a faculty in Bangladesh. And at the same time, I'm heavily engaged in research in this field. So I want to say the challenge first and end with a positive note, having a better experience, and maybe what we should look at. I have strong issues about that as well. So yeah. Being from a developing country like Bangladesh, so I have concerns there. So what happened during the pandemic, we had online classes, and one of my students wanted to meet me in person, saying he's struggling a lot and he got depressed because he was getting good grades till he joined the online classes, because prior to that, the assignments for literature and other subjects were easily copied using other tools, but mathematics and engineering related subjects where you do problem solving were still challenging. So teachers would find out whether it's AI generated or tool generated, because there are not enough number of steps. So somebody just writes the answer. But now the tools have become so precise. They exactly mimic the ways people do solve mathematical problems. So he was struggling because he would do it on himself, but the others who were cheating probably did it faster. And the exams, teachers wanted to make the exams harder so that the online classes were engaging. And he was struggling being one of the honest persons. So we actually did a small scale research in our country, and we found out it was actually a major problem. And they are, taking extra steps, going back just like human subjects. So because AI actually mimics and statistically generates the results, it actually got very scary for us because it's so human-like. When you are looking at enough of them, but it's very easy to make a mistake there. So that's where we struggled a lot firsthand. And so as we are using AI and we are telling it's a statistical tool and it solves the problems, so what happens is it relies on data. So when we have lots of data, it goes closer and closer towards accuracy, probably through the accurate tools, unless it's a generative AI, then it also generates. So what we wanted to do as a research base using AI, we wanted to find out what are the low-cost mechanisms to find out whether you are not feeling well. So we don't want to wear a wearable, we don't want to purchase anything, maybe just the data mobile phone stores, how long you have used which app, because every mobile phone saves things like that. So we used AI tools to see how you are feeling, the data people are inputting, whether there is a correlation to that related to how you are using your mobile phone. And actually the results were pretty good and interesting. So that's where we used AI very interestingly for undergraduate students who are not doing so well during the pandemic. So we wanted to see, and it was interesting, like if you're too long on social media, it's not that you're not that well compared to the one who is hopping from apps to apps. If you're ordering out food too much late at night, so there were different categories of applications, different timings, which actually had interesting correlations. So there are many interesting ways. It's one example. So as I'm saying that, we are relying on data. So being from Bangladesh, the only concern or one of the major concern I constantly have is when we are making bigger decisions, do we have enough representation, especially from the marginal communities? Because if the data is not good, if you have one Bangladeshi that's not good enough, probably every time AI will tell that, oh, that's the bad Bangladeshi person. So we have to make sure, as we are using these tools, we have to make sure we have enough representation, and through the process, we have to make sure it's ethical, because probably you know about how unethically people were engaged from Africa and other poorer countries to label data. They were distressed, it was very ill paid. So these are the concerns when we are looking at data. So yeah, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to hear more through the questions.
Well, thank you very much for this, Nova. And I can already promise that we will come back to the question of how do you use AI in the classroom and the specific challenges of that. And we're going to look at the question of data as well, because we receive a lot of questions on that. Barend, can I turn to you and with the same two questions? So how is AI already changing your field of research? And what do you look at the critical issues that you'd like to put on the table?
Thank you, Denise. Mathieu. Let me start by saying that I hate the term intelligence in artificial intelligence. I even saw already a question, what about empathy? Well, let's be frank here. There's nothing intelligent about it, nothing like empathy or even sentience. It is a very advanced form of pattern recognition and statistics. Okay. And so we even had a meeting yesterday in my field, or health, where we decided we will only use it for what we used to call monk work, you know, massive data sets in which you have to see patterns or pictures or whatever. Absolutely not in terms of any real discovery or intelligence. And of course, we can argue what is intelligence in the first place. But if we define it as the ability to see problems, see through them, and find a solution, there's nothing intelligent about it. And the fact that the computer beats us in chess means that chess is just following rules. And if you play 1 million or trillion chess games against yourself, you win every game. That's quite logical. So memory, pattern recognition in highly complex data is what we use it for. It already transforms my field like crazy, like you can predict protein folding. One tiny example is that we are currently calculating 230 billion variants of the spike protein of COVID virus. But that's again following rules. If you know the amino acid sequence of a molecule, there are a number of basic rules how that molecule will look in 3D and how it will bind to antibodies and so on. So again, there's just use it for monk work. Don't use it for anything intelligent, let alone empathy, which relates to what Nova said. You know, it will have no consideration with race or, you know, equity or equality or whatever. It just munches the data and comes out with some stuff. Now, the second point I would like to make, which is much more important than this one, which is a bit philosophical. The second one is very practical. And that was also my reaction to Jean-Claude's piece in policy. I don't think regulation, as in trying to curb the companies that do artificial intelligence stuff like LLMs, I will still use the term, although I hate it, because it will move to areas that we do not control, which might be even worse. So rather than trying to stop it, I think we should regulate it in practice by giving it better input. Because what still counts, even for, quote, AI, is the good old crap in, crap out. And if you scrape the whole web without much restrictions, and you let LLM come out with output, there is too many hallucinations. And they look so beautiful that it's difficult to recognize them as hallucinations, and therefore, in our health field, it could be disastrous. So if false positives matter, don't use it. That's my advice. And always have a human check the output. But more importantly, what we should do is, rather than feeding any AI type models with text, which is highly ambiguous and a nightmare for machines, they have to do text mining, disambiguate, all these things, unless you just put words behind each other, is to feed AI algorithms with what we call fully AI ready fair data. That is machine readable data, knowledge graphs, with very strong provenance. So you know exactly where every triple in that graph comes from. Is it from a wearable? Is it from a trusted source? Then you can, that's one thing we have to do. And secondly, and then I will stop, is that we have to give the models on top of the AI, you know, the algorithm, a so-called conceptual model. And I'll give you one example from my field, the very simple thing that already goes wrong if you don't do that. If you have 4 triples in a knowledge graph that are all true, surgeon is person, person has liver, and liver is organ, and surgeon can transplant organs, all true. First inference of any model without any conceptual model behind it is surgeon can transplant his own liver. Perfectly logical inference, because there's no clue in the computer that that is impossible for other reasons than explained in the graph. So the lack of context, the lack of conceptual models is where 90% or 99% of the hallucinations come from. We can weed them out by feeding the models with proper data, with strong provenance, and not with text.
Thanks for this, Berend. I mean, I suggest we come back to the question of data, because there are a lot of questions that would ensue from what you've just said. But let's hear first from the other panelists as well. Ruth, would you like to give us your sense of how AI is changing your field of research?
Sure, thank you so much, and lovely to see everybody. So yeah, my home discipline is forensic science, and I think what's been really interesting with this influx of interest in AI is the reflection that actually, with the big transition that forensic science has been going through, from a sort of classical forensic science that you might have seen in the CSI shows of the noughties to a more modern day forensic science that we're working with now, is that actually AI has been with us for quite a long time. I think the 2 major areas that we're using it in forensic science have been, as Berend was saying, pattern recognition. It's incredibly good for that. So in forensic science, that's anything from fingerprint comparison through to facial recognition in larger data sets. And then the second area is the capabilities to have larger data sets. So the things that have been made possible in the last 5 to 7 years have really come about through that interrogation of large data sets, so whether that is facial recognition itself, or whether it's the increasing prevalence of each of us having a digital fingerprint through our mobile phone devices, our electronic devices, and the implications that that has when we're trying to reconstruct where people have been, who knows who, and what people have been doing. So I think that's been quite an interesting reflection, that actually AI has been here for actually quite a long time. And it is definitely part of that transition and that progress, but it's not brand new. But the other role that I have at UCL is as Vice Dean in the Engineering Faculty for Interdisciplinarity. And so a lot of the research that we've been doing more recently has been thinking about how can we find these interdisciplinary ways of thinking, of seeing, of doing, that can find innovative solutions to complex global challenges. And the really exciting research that we've been doing over the last 9 months or so has been looking at what lessons can we learn from the way that AI has been used in forensic science, and use that to think about how we can apply those learnings to this sort of systems thinking that's going to help us with problem solving those complex challenges. And I think that's where AI has a huge amount of potential, because in the past the bottleneck has really been about the limitations we've had in terms of the breadth and depth of knowledge that we can bring to the table, because we're constrained by geography and by time, and those constraints are now being lifted. And I think AI from my perspective in this particular area, that there have been two particular ways AI is doing that. The first one is the tools themselves. So we are actually now capable of bringing much more insight, whether that's from industry, whether it's from different disciplines, whether it's from different geographies and generations together, to actually be able to look at it in that holistic way. The second is the fact that AI, and particularly generative AI in the last 9 months or so, it impacts everybody. It impacts every discipline, it impacts every sector. And that's really created an opportunity for conversations. It's shaken up the status quo. People are more willing to ask questions and to think potentially more laterally or more into the future than perhaps they were before. And it's creating this really fertile ground, I think, for finding these collaborative ways of thinking. So I think I'm excited about that. But Matthew, you also talked about challenges and the things that keep us up at night. And I think for me, that's really around how do we think about these tools in our society. So we're fairly confident that that those with good intentions will have intended outcomes of utilizing these tools, but there will be unintended consequences. And then we've got bad actors who will have intended consequences, but also unintended consequences. So how does the regulation and conceptual frameworks that we put in place account for both intended and unintended consequences? I think there's a really interesting piece with research and innovation around the role of competition and collaboration, and how's that going to change as we go forward. So that's those are the sort of things on my mind. But I'll just draw to a close. I think technologically, AI is opening up many opportunities for broader, more lateral thinking, and societally, it's opening up conversations, which I think takes us into a very interesting place as we shape the future.
Thanks for this, Ruth. Very good. A lot of stuff that I would like to bring back to the table during this discussion. Isuru, can we turn to you now with our first two questions? Give us a sense of how AI is changing your field, and what are the big issues that you think we need to address when thinking about AI and science moving forward?
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I'm Takeaki. First, I'd like to talk about the current affecting of AI on my field of research. My field is design of buildings. So I'd like to talk about this. In the design of buildings, we have to take into account three factors. One is artistic aspect. Second is strength. Third is environmental aspect. As for the artistic aspect, we have many databases on artistic facade design. This database may have been constructed from past experience or captured by machine learning or deep learning. For the second strength aspect, we have to consider both resilience and cost of buildings. Resilience is a very complicated concept and index. So we have to consider multi-hazard risks and recovery from damages. So furthermore, cost is also a complex index, and we can use many databases on materials and construction process. We can also find and produce new high-performance materials using AI. For the environmental aspect, decarbonization or low carbon policy is a very important theme in building design. In the research of exploitation of low carbon materials, simulation using AI is very important and powerful. Next, I'd like to talk about the impact of AI on my field of research in the next 10 years. We have three themes. The first is BIM, Building Information Modeling, BIM. BIM is getting strong interest in my field of building construction. After or during the building design process, we construct BIM data. By using such BIM data, we can realize three-dimensional images of buildings and simulate building construction process. This BIM data is also useful for the restoration of old buildings. There is a dispute on the necessity of actual building models for artistic design. BIM may be able to replace the role of making of actual building models, but I think relationship between eye and brain based on actual sense and perception should be discussed in more detail. I think this should be addressed as a priority. Well, the second one is a digital twin. Do you know, in digital twin, we compare two objects. One is an actual design object, and the other is a computer simulation model. By modifying the computer simulation model, we can proceed to an advanced actual design object. It is understood the combination of digital twin with AI is difficult now. The third one is metaverse. Metaverse is another advanced tool using AI. We can experience a virtual space and realize creative actions. So, and one is AGI. Do you know the AGI? Artificial General Intelligence may be related to this, I think, metaverse. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Isuru, for sharing that experience and for bringing the whole aspect of the metaverse and virtual reality. That is something that I think requires a discussion.
Yes.
As well, and it would be very interesting to start thinking, for example, about what international research collaboration could look like in the metaverse, and how we coordinate that with actual research. Leslie, your turn now for this initial round of inputs, where we're looking at how AI is already changing your field of research. You're a political scientist. We've read a lot about how AI is going to be used for policy making. So please, can you talk us through some of those changes that you're already witnessing?
Sure. Good to be here. Well, I'll try not to repeat too many of the points made by my colleagues when I address the use of AI, and particularly large language models in the field of political science and more generally in social science. So AI is currently being used by social and political science to conduct research in a number of diverse ways, including sentiment analysis. That's investigating social media and news articles to gauge public sentiments on political issues. This helps political scientists understand the mood of the electorate and can make for more informed policy recommendations. It's used in election forecasting based on historical data, demographics, and polling data. It's used in content analysis and natural language processing to analyze political speeches, debates, legislative documents, to identify trends and gain insights about political ideologies, party positions, and policy proposals as well. And I'm going to focus, though, on the use of AI and specifically LLMs, large language models, in what I consider to be the most path-breaking way. And that's the development of theories, forecasting or scenario building based on simulations of the likely opinions and behavioral reactions of human populations to actual or potential events and interventions. So importantly for this research, the AIs employed can be bestowed with specific endowments, information, and/or preferences, after which their expressed opinions, values, or behavior can be assessed, effectively simulating the responses and reactions of specific human populations. Using LLMs in this manner, at a minimum, allows the generation of hypotheses that subsequently can be tested on human populations. So apart from the ease and lower cost of employing AI instead of human participants in such simulations, there are other benefits. I'll list a few. So in simulations, LLMs might reduce or eliminate some of the problems and limitations associated with surveying, sampling, or monitoring human populations, including the availability or accessibility of participants, and especially participants with specific endowments, information, and/or preferences. The self-selection of participants, the attrition of participants over time, limited human attention spans and response biases, and the challenges associated with privacy, safety, or honesty regarding provocative topics or high-risk situations. Of course, most of this use of AI in social science research is largely untested, and there are potential problems and risks associated with it. Most of the attention given to the problems associated with the use of LLMs in social scientific research focus on three kinds of risk. Ruth mentioned some of these: the perpetuation of stereotypes, unfair discrimination, and algorithmic bias, the inadvertent generation of poor, false, or misleading information, including hallucinations, as was mentioned by Bernd, and human actors intentionally employing LLMs to fabricate information or cause harm. I won't say any more about these problems, notwithstanding their significance. Rather, I'll address two other types of risks that often receive little attention. So there's a great deal of effort going into removing algorithmic bias from AI programs, all to the good. Of course, human populations remain quite biased. So to the extent that sanitized LLMs are used as surrogates for human populations and simulations, the data gathered may not be very reliable. And my second concern applies to social scientific research, but goes beyond it as it concerns the impact of AI on its users. My concern is the likelihood that the widespread use of AI will result in substantial de-skilling. De-skilling refers to the atrophy of cognitive or social aptitudes as a result of the decline of certain activities and efforts where these aptitudes are generally formed. So a good example might be in the lay population with the sharp decline in wayfinding skills as increasingly people start using GPS. How might it occur in academia? AI is going to be cheaper to use by social scientists. It may cause a decline in the use of research assistants. Research assistants get their skills developed through apprenticeship, and if they're not being used as RAs, some of those skills won't get developed. And in addition, AI is increasingly employed to generate hypotheses, as well as write social scientific papers and monographs, and you can imagine various cognitive skills declining in social scientists as these skills aren't developed because AI serves to replace them in their use. So I've got lots more opinions about this, but I'll stop there because of time, and maybe in the Q&A we can address it further.
Thank you very much for this, Leslie. That was, the issue of de-skilling of cognitive aptitudes is clearly one that we're all worried about, and that is absolutely absolutely essential. Thanks for bringing that up. May I now turn to you, Xiaomei, and ask? I mean, because your work, your own field of research, in a way, is observing all those trends and how the production of science evolves over time. And so I would like to ask you if we can already observe an impact of artificial intelligence on certain publishing trends, and on that basis also ask you your reflections about the critical issues that you feel we need to be addressed as we move forward in these reflections. Please tell me.
Yeah. Hi, hello everyone. Yeah, so my primary interest is really from information science. We're looking at the value of information and the quality information and the use of information. So we all know the role of scientific literature in our scholarship activities and research as a whole. So we have seen all this use of AI tools in almost every part of this life cycle of scholarly communication. So for example, generating abstracts and generating hypothesis ideas. And we also can see the trend that the AI tools is getting better and better so quickly that a pose a challenge. Sometimes one day we can that's conceivable that we won't be able to tell that the part of literature is written by human researchers or from AI generated materials. So if we just primarily focus on the quality of this scientific literature in terms of how it was created, who was responsible behind it, how it's supposed to grow, and how we can face the future with the AI and the tools so powerful. So there are several possible scenarios I'd like to introduce here. One is maybe one is on the best case scenario, maybe one is in the less optimal scenarios. So I'm a big fan of Vannevar Bush's mimics, which is similar to what we have been working on all these years about human being collectively, we call it collective intelligence. Put all this together, our research use that as an intellectual base of where we can go from there as a standing point. So the quality was coming into this as the input is very important in terms of, for example, we have seen some debates about the authorship or co-authorship, whether ChatGPT should be a co-author. What does it entail? So on the other hand, we can also thinking about what does it mean by our researchers' expertise anymore, in terms of if we can imagine the big body of the literature in the future maybe is increasing part, it become very blurred the boundary. So we also can see lots of other techniques that's quite useful to help us to improve the quality of rigor research and scientific communication. So for example, citation, that's a one specific task we see in many publications, but the quality of the citations is the researcher citing the most appropriate and most powerful citation, the references available in the entire body of literature available to the scientific community. That's a question. So with AI too, we can see that could become possible to improve it a lot. So in that way, is improving the scientific base. On the other hand, we have also here this debate and the role of the human researchers versus the AI tools. To what extent, the major point I want to make is AI or the similar powerful tools here, they're going to make transformative changes. Not only we want to think about to what extent the human researchers should stay in the loop. And the question is how that the current scientific literature, how the current scientific communication or scholarly communication may change altogether fundamentally. Maybe we no longer need like 10 page, 15 pages papers anymore. We may face the future we don't even know what it look like. So the fundamental change is real. So based on that, I will just bring this to this panel that the AI tools are so powerful, promising, that can do lots of good things. But on the other hand, there are lots of things we are used to do. We must think or rethink how it may change all of us. And also, as a part mentioned by Leslie, how that if we have a powerful tool, we don't have to exercise or we don't have to use our muscles as before. So those are also implications. There are two particular things I like to mention. One is the uncertainty in scientific research, the role of it. And also the other one is interdisciplinary and scientific discoveries. One of the common way you will see for many Nobel Prize winning discoveries, they're bridging fields that are very far away, apart from each other. I think those are areas AI tool can help a lot. And so put it all together, then my position here is this is a wonderful tool, powerful tool, but also could be a standard as powerful. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for this. Colleagues, there's a lot of discussions going on already in the chat and in the Q&A. There is one on whether or that was triggered, Baron, by your comment on artificial intelligence not being intelligent but being essentially dumb, and that generated a lot of reaction. I'm reminded of a discussion I had with the people in charge at NVIDIA, which is one of the largest AI developers in companies in the world, with one of their main researchers there, where he was saying that indeed, for him at least, artificial intelligence as we know it now is dumb. These are tools that can only do one thing. They can only do what we ask them to do and nothing more. But what his big worries are about what will come in 2 or 3 years' time when AI starts generating AI for, and that's where, you know, he felt there may be an addition of black boxes where the lack of transparency in the processes and in how the responses are generated. That was where his worries lie. But Bernd, you've shared your thoughts in the chat. So I invite people to read the exchange there on intelligence and what motivated your comments. I was wondering if there are other panelists who would like to react to that specific point on the intelligence, essentially asking ourselves, is human intelligence different from anything qualitatively or quantitatively different from something that can be created artificially? Leslie, is that you? I think you want to comment on that, yeah, please.
Sure. I mean, I think in these matters, it's appropriate to look at it pragmatically. The proof is kind of in the pudding. So, you know, we're intelligent as we demonstrate ourselves to be, and the same goes for AI. AI was thought never to be intelligent enough to win at chess, and then at Go, and then at Hold'em poker, and it's surpassed all those obstacles. And so we set up new obstacles to suggest that it's not intelligent until it can do something else. Tests have been done in terms of creativity. It's not easy to measure creativity in AI or humans, but to the extent that it is measured, AI, LLM seem to demonstrate about the same amount of creativity as average people. You know, whether it understands conceptual models, I mean, the question is really, you know, how well do humans understand conceptual models? I think the pragmatic approach is to say, if we use them effectively, that's the assumption is we understand them. And I think AI is showing itself to use conceptual models effectively in that respect. When it became the Go champion, it made moves that the masters of Go said they'd never seen before. Now, whether they understood a concept, when the AI understood a conceptual model to do that or not is always debatable. But I think in this respect, it's just a matter of assessing the intelligence by what it can do. And, you know, when it matches human standards in some that, I think we have to be relatively humble about our own capacities.
That reminds me, Leslie, of a joke I sometimes make, which is that artificial intelligence ultimately forces human to be really intelligent, and that might be even more difficult in a way than developing good AI tools. Bernd, I feel that you want to add something.
I already sort of regret that I brought it up, because before you know it, you go into this philosophical discussion what intelligence is in the first place. That was never the intention. The reason I brought it up is that people indeed sometimes mix up sentience or empathy with intelligence. And I think we are, as humans, still far superior from machines in detecting things that do not fit in our conceptual model, That doesn't mean that humans, Homo sapiens, has the best conceptual model of the universe. And as we discussed in Montreux with Noah Harari, you know, it is not even needed that AI becomes really sentient or empathic for us to see it as very dangerous, because we perceive it as being having empathy. Like I said in the chat, some pictures or output of AI can create big emotions in humans. But like we do that in animals sometimes, we project our own emotions on another organism, in this case an algorithm, and that's very dangerous. So that was my only point. And the other point I would like to make on this is there is really a big ethical thing around this. Not only that we could litter the world with misinformation by abusing AI and LLMs, but I don't know whether you recently read the analyses that Microsoft currently loses $20 per paid user per month. So we decided yesterday in our health environment to curb the use of AI as much as possible, also for the reason that A, it has an incredible ecological footprint.
Correct.
It's very, very expensive. And B, we effectively create vendor lock-in for the big five, because only they can dominate this field by taking hundreds of millions of losses on LLMs today, then making us all addicted to them, and then they control us, because nobody else can afford this enormous loss and the enormous ecological energy footprint that we create by our questions, playing around with this funny tool that really has a major ecological impact.
Absolutely. I think this is critical, and discussions around the ethics of AI are slowly picking up on this. But I think one of the major ethical questions is that balancing act between the promises of AI on the one hand, and indeed the ecological footprint of developing all those tools in parallel and in competition with one another, as a matter of fact. There is a question, Yuzuru, before we turn to other issues. There is a question around the metaverse and the feeling that maybe you would want to, I don't know if you've seen the question, you want to add a few words about what you started saying about the metaverse and how that is important and why that is an issue that we need to keep an eye on, virtual reality and metaverse.
Yes, metaverse is just combination of VR, virtual reality, and AR, it augmented, I think, reality. So it's a combination of VR and AR. So we can experience a virtual space. So you using a metaverse, and to just realize creative actions. In the real world, we can experience, but in a virtual space, and we can just create the original action and creative actions. I think that is the good things of metaverse. So, and it's very so. But I think the combination of metaverse with I think real world is not so easy. But we have to do that in the near future. So I have one anecdote. A famous Japanese mathematician Kiyoshi Oka, who spent some time of his life at Paris, France, said there are two minds in your brain. The first one is logical thinking, I think related to generative AI, and the second one is passion. I think that's generative AI cannot produce passion. You understand? Passion is related to emotion of human being. So, and we have to consider that one, a passion in the development of AI. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for this. Indeed. Colleagues, there are questions, colleague panelists, there are questions addressed specifically to you in the Q&A, and I as much as possible, will try to maintain the discussion at address issues that speak to more than one speaker. So try and when you have a second, maybe address and respond to those questions in the chat. I would like to take us to the issue of authorship, which was raised during your initial input. I mean, you're all authors. You all write papers. Some of you are editors of journals. One of the big questions now is around the authorship, the use of artificial intelligence tools, of LLMs in particular, and what does that mean for scientific research and scientific ownership and intellectual property in particular. And I would like just to hear some of you speak to that issue. You know, what should we require that the use of AI tools be disclosed? But how would we do that? And what would it look like in practice, or what does it already look like in practice in your experience? Leslie, I think you've switched on your microphone. You want to address that?
Yeah, this is a fraught issue, I think. It's challenging. So just in my department, we're grappling with this now as we try to figure out what we should do with comprehensive exams for graduate students. And this, it goes to undergraduates as well, where increasing numbers are using AI, and to what extent is that going to impact how well we can assess what they've actually learned and how they can demonstrate the skill sets that they've gained. I mean, the challenge is, you know, we want people to when they demonstrate their own work, we don't expect it's just coming out of their own heads without any input. We assume that they've read lots of books and talked to lots of colleagues, and that they're integrating a lot of material from the outside world to produce that. So in that sense, AI is just one more resource out there that they can use to integrate into their work. And it's the challenge is it's a resource that is unpublished effectively, and so we can't check for plagiarism very well. But I think that the real question is, and this goes back to the issue of de-skilling, is in a closed room setting, to what extent can that person demonstrate the same knowledge set and skill sets when they're not simply tapping AI to do it for them? To the extent that they can do that, then I think the use of AI is all to the good, and it's a supplement to what they're doing as opposed to a surrogate for it.
Thanks for this. Yeah, that's something that Nova also mentioned. Indeed, it relates to the use of AI in the classroom and how we use it in teaching and in training. In your experience, Leslie, just or others, but would you think it's better to introduce those tools, AI tools, in research at the undergraduate level, assuming that this is where research is going, so might as well start already at the undergraduate level? Or is that something that we keep for the graduate level when people are indeed being trained to become professional researchers?
Yeah, just briefly, I mean, undergraduates are using it already quite widely. So in my class, I have them use it in two ways. And the first one, I give them a topic and they use AI to explore it, and then they supplement the AI contributions with their own. In the second project, they sit down with pen and paper in the classroom and without any electronic technology whatsoever, and they answer a question, and I get a copy of that, and then they go back and use AI to try to improve it. And I think that's the sort of dual thing we're going to have to be doing, where we're always testing what the unconnected human being, unconnected in the sense of not with electronic devices and AI, is capable on its own, and seeing whether the AI is value added.
Thanks for this, Leslie. Ruth, have I seen you wave your hand? Yeah, please. And then Nova, I think you also would like to maybe say a few words on that.
Thank you. I think everything Leslie said is so interesting and actually really gets to the heart of this. And I think there's also something about what is it that education is for and what is it we're trying to achieve. And I think I'm really compelled by a lot of these studies that are looking at the future of work, and that there are significant conversations that agree that we don't know what a lot of the jobs are going to be in 15 years' time. But one of the things we do have a lot more insight on is what kind of skills are going to be required. Analytical thinking, critical thinking are often top of those lists. So my view is that if we're thinking of education as preparing people to be productive people who can contribute to society and help us solve big problems, we need to be thinking about how people are thinking rather than what they know. So in my view, it's those tools are there. The genie is out of the bottle. How can we create critical thinkers, lateral thinkers who are able to use these tools for the very, very best? And I guess that's something that I think is part of these conversations that we need to make sure we have.
That resonates with the approach that the Learning Planet Institute here in France is having, where on the one hand, they're trying to teach executive decision-making in uncertain times to their graduate students, regardless of what they're studying, what their field of study is really trying to teach them how to make decisions in uncertainty on the one hand, but also including things like wisdom as part of the training of graduate students, which I find interesting on an intellectual level at least. Nova, I saw you. I think you wanted to come in also on the question of education and the impact of AI on that.
Yeah, I agree with Ruth. Like we cannot deny it because it's here already and it's a powerful tool. So we have to know what are the ways we can use it. And the critical question is how to use it for manual labor, things that are laborious, but not that, you don't need to use your intellectual skills, and maximize the ways you can use your intellectual capabilities using things we can generate using AI. So yeah, I think that's how we can, because we cannot just say don't use it, or it's going to be harmful, or because students are already using it, they're exploring it, they're playing with it, they're trying out different things, they're trying out, I have seen students have shown me AI written poetry in different formats, in different Bengali writers formats, and they're having lots of fun with it, apart from other ways of using it. So we have to incorporate it rather than just push it away. Otherwise, we will be distancing ourselves as well. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks, Nova. I had my initial question was less about education, was more about authorship of papers and of research. And I just wanted to know whether there's anyone who wants to share thoughts on that. Backtrack 6 months ago, that was everywhere. In every journal, we had the impression that ChatGPT had already replaced a significant number of authors of scientific papers. That might have been just the normal curve of discussion hype in the social media sphere. Is that something that you worry, or do you have thoughts to share on the authorship and the use of LLMs in writing papers, Barend?
Can I say something from a scientific point of view? Or, the most, as I said, we should use LLM. Let's focus on LLM here to do, let's say the stupid work for us, like writing papers, okay? Because the intelligence, again, is in the experiment and in our findings. And then what we showed already recently is if you feed an LLM or one of these tools, I'm not doing this myself, so don't ask me the details, my colleagues do it. And you feed it with what we call nanopublications, that is, machine readable assertions about your findings. It writes a perfect text for you. Why not use it for that? Science is not about writing narrative. It is about transmitting knowledge, and insights. So I have no trouble that parts of text, as long as you know it, are generated from proper information by an LLM LLM, and then maybe you still have to review it and so on. But why not use it to do a lot of work? We are not in science to write prosa. We are in science to exchange knowledge. So I have not so much trouble in writing my students using LLM to write parts of their text, as long as they tell me.
Thanks for this, Baron. Thank you, Brian, for reminding us in the chat that the difference between knowledge and wisdom. That's very useful.
Mhm.
The notion of quality control, reliability has not been big thus far in our discussion. This is at the core of what we do as scientists and what you do as researchers. Scientific results, we know that they must be replicable, they must be reliable, they must be explainable, all things that are very difficult with artificial intelligence tools as they are now. Is there something there in your experience that you would like to share in terms of how we can use artificial intelligence tools in ways that are that support explainability rather than it's just a black box and series of correlation? Do you have experience to share there?
Yeah, I think the key word here is provenance. And I always say when people say fair is not saying anything about quality, so what is quality of data? The data coming from my step counter are horribly bad, but combining 1 million step counters still gave us some very good insights. So I think the provenance of any piece of information that is fed to any model is crucial, so that I can trace back how these artificial intelligence or these models come to certain conclusions. And now we have to do that ourselves. To give you the last example, also some fun, the latest hallucination of ChatGPT-4 was that I am a co-founder of the Gene Ontology, which is crap. Now, of course, when Giancarlo, our guy in Twente who studies this, this behavior, he found out in 5 seconds how that came. He said, if you had written go fair, that I'm heading, with a dash between go and fair, this would not have happened. Because GEO is also the acronym for gene ontology. The thing finds the pattern that I'm clearly a geneticist, so it hallucinates that I must be the founder of the gene ontology, because the term GO is everywhere near my name. But it's part of the concept go fair. So just one little dash between those two words would have prevented that. That's all sort of, we have to find out ourselves where this crazy stuff comes from. If this would all be purely provenance from nano publications and fair data that are really full of provenance, we would not have to do that. We would know where these things come from. So my statement would be provenance, also about the process that the model used to come to a certain conclusion, is even more important than quality of the data per se.
Interesting. Xiaomei, is that something that somehow you can also reflect on a little bit for us based on your experience?
Yeah, that's I think that's related. I think, as I mentioned, and the mimics, the idea that's proposed by Vannevar Bush in 1945 is still the kind of ideal situation we have yet reached at this point. So the provenance is one issue, but I think that the bottom line is in the context. In the mimics idea that you not only you can see the records of knowledge, but also you can see the experience of different individuals when they come across this particular point in the knowledge space, what their decisions, how they decide where to go from there. So put it together, I also think the expertise, we're talking about the knowledge and the meta-knowledge, which is the knowledge about the knowledge. Those are the things that are important in our research community. So experts, they know not only about what they know, and they know the certainty or the uncertainty associated with that particular part of the landscape. And so that's evolving, also developing for researchers to build up their expertise over time. So the earlier conversation discussed the implications about education. So what is needed, what was essential becomes not so essential anymore, because, for example, we have GPS, we no longer print out the roads or plans we need to follow. So that kind of a capability, do we need to maintain it, or what is the motivation to be there? As by human nature, we have easier, powerful tool to use. We can't stop them to use those tools. And that's similar to this situation. We have these powerful AI tools. So instead of thinking about what we can do, I think we got a big gap to fill here is what are the strengths and the weaknesses on our human beings, what are the best job for us to do. And so we can also think about what could be in the future if we don't have the necessity to use those skills or the muscles. Maybe, for example, we choose to go to gyms instead of doing the labor work. So in the future, maybe researchers, as you can imagine here, if they can produce equivalent creative work with higher productivity, so what are the motivations behind it for them to continue to learn the skills, practice skills, rather than shift their focus on something that can better use powerful tools? So those are all possible, wide open possibilities. So in terms of authorship, I think it really boils down to the trust. If you have this researcher, you trust this, you take their word for it. But with the AI, if you know they have some flaws at this point, this version, next version, where's the point? To what extent do you want to double check it? What extent do you want to check everything or believe something? How do you make that decision? And also differentiate which part is from human being as we understood, or which part is from a machine, we know the flaws. And if also the machine, they develop themselves, they get stronger as well. So if you ask them today, will it be different from yesterday? So those kind of noises, background, that could introduce in the scientific literature. So I will say it will be no longer the case we can fully rely on the scientific literature anymore before we think about what does all imply when we open this floodgate of lots of new inputs.
Yeah, thanks for that, Xiaoming. Thanks for those reflections. I mean, ultimately, it forces us, I guess, to rethink. Again, it's another impetus for rethinking the incentive system that we have in the science system, right? Which is primarily based on publications and authorship. Leslie, I felt that you wanted to say something, address that issue.
Yeah, and sort of building on what Xiaomei was saying and linking it a little bit to Barent's notion that you know, it would be good for the human beings to sort of do the scientific work, but for AI to write up the papers. I think you know, a lot of what's in scientific papers isn't just the reporting of the findings, but it has to do with the implications, the discussion, and the application. And I think there's a danger in letting AI write up our reports for us in that regard. E.M. Foster, a novelist, once said that I don't know what I think until I see what I say. And the idea is that it's in putting things in writing that we actually sometimes come to understand the importance and ramifications of what we're doing. And so I think it would be dangerous. And I notice all this in my undergraduates, that in one of the assignments I had them do where they used AI, their papers started to look a lot like the way ChatGPT started conveying things as long lists of possibilities and findings without really explanations or examples or explorations of them. And so I think there's a danger in over relying on AI, and then with depleted human skills, we start to resemble the AI in a number of ways that are perhaps not very productive.
May I react?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, briefly, Baron, please go ahead.
Well, I think we have recently published for APIN, the Academic Publishers Implementation Network in CoFair, that it is very important to first put your results in machine readable format. So you are very precise. Then you ask the LLMs to write text that will be very precisely describing what you do. Of course, you review them afterwards. So it's just a draft. Then you review them. And if you have all kinds of logical arguments that why you came to a certain conclusion, you have to write it yourself. But the other thing that it solves a little bit, at least to a certain extent, is that there were papers years ago that articles written by native English speakers had a higher chance to be accepted by journals. So there is a real chance for people from non-speaking English-speaking countries to get a better access, because they get a good draft in English. They can still, of course, you always review it. That's a very clear and important point to make here. But what you see is that the sloppy use of language in the literature makes it almost impossible for machines to text mine properly, retrospectively, the text. One of my most hated statements from 2005 is, why bury it first and then mine it again? Narrative is the worst way to communicate science, the precise things you want to say. Of course, your rhetorics around why you believe it, that we need narrative for that. So really, if you look at the knowledge graph that a company that I work with made from 275 databases in the life sciences, if you evaluate the annotations of experts on actual facts, scientific claims in that graph, my estimate is that Medline, our literature, at least 30% of the assertions you can find there are wrong. So don't rely on the literature as a good source of information.
No,
even the peer-reviewed literature, there's a lot of crap there. So crap in, crap out. Again, be careful, even what you find in peer-reviewed literature. A lot of it is not true.
Thanks for this, Barend. I wanted to talk about Izuru. Do you want to come in on that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Direct to the review of first works will become easier by the AI. And can I talk about the peer review system of publishing? So because I think AI can be a fair reviewer. So I think it's better to add AI as a reviewer to the real human big reviewer. So do you think so? The AI has, I think, big database, the good review. So just add the AI as one reviewer to the, I think, real human big reviewers. Do you think so?
That's a question to the panelists. I was on a panel recently with a group of people from research councils who indeed are using AI for review panels, and they were discussing the policies that they've put in place. But ultimately, the idea was that AI can be used and is useful, and very much in line with what you were saying now, Barend. The idea was that ultimately choices are made by humans, and humans are accountable, not the AI. But with your permission, I'd like us to move to another topic, and it's one that I think, Nova, you were the first one to bring up in the discussion, and it's one that has to do with the fact that AI works on data, and data that is machine readable and is well curated, and that has big implications for marginalized groups in society, and I would say marginalized groups, but equally, or at least the problem is similar, marginalized countries and regions of the world that are not producing the producer of as much data, and possibly for the kind of discussion we're having today, marginalized disciplines. And I wanted maybe Nova ask you to expand a little bit on what you started saying about what you're observing in Bangladesh and with marginalized population in terms of how these are reflected in the data and in AI specifically.
Okay, thank you very much. I was actually thinking whether I should raise the hand when the previous comment was going on. It's a beautiful question, because when I think, if I'm not wrong, Barnard was talking about when we are using AI for writing papers, it can actually make better English written papers. So people who are not native English writers can write better papers and can get better publication. And what that is doing actually is actually continuing the colonial mindset, like you have to have a native English speaker or English writer. So we are not solving the actual problem, but we are keeping the problem alive with the use of AI. So these are the scary parts of it. So when you are training data that has all these going on biases, or the bias that went on for so long, it will actually do what we have already there. So that's why the first model of the generative models, actually, they were abusive, they were harassing, because internet was actually ugly. So we had to tag the data to find out what is good, what is bad. We had to label it through a notorious process. And now we have data. But now the question comes, when we are making a judgment, or when we are relying on lots of statistical data, what are the representations? It's not the model we can blame. It's not AI we have to blame. So it's us who are using it. We have to be very careful, because we may not have enough people representing the marginal community, but we want to help them, because probably they're the one who would be affected by the policies or by the inclusion rules. So it's on us how much we are training the data, how we should include it, how we should make sure that there is representation, or if there's not enough representation, whether or not to use that data for making a critical decision. Because when we are making a large decision about what's going on, what's happening in the world, what's the impact of it, if we don't have representation, for example, we don't have enough people who are from this marginal community when we're looking at, suppose, a pandemic, the data on pandemic, and we are thinking, okay, these are the communities that are not that much affected, but probably that small representative data is sharp enough. So whether we can generalize from small data, or whether we look into it and use it in a different way, that's a bigger question to explore. But we have to be very cautious of and aware that we don't have representation of all type of data, all type of people. And even within a Western country, very wealthy country, we may not have representation of all the people who are actually representing the community. Thank you very much.
No, thanks for this, Nova. And this is absolutely true. The question of data. I mean, there's a lot of technical questions around data and how we organize data and produce them and curate them, which maybe we don't want to explore too deeply today. But there was one interesting question in the chat about if we're moving forward now with LLMs, ChatGPT, and the likes, being effectively the authors of papers, you could even imagine, I'm sorry, I'm making just, but you could imagine that the human brains go into the production of a data set. And that's actually the research. The research is the production of the data set and the well-curated, high-quality data set. And the article becomes almost an annex, very much in the way, Baron, that you were approaching it. And hence could be written by or essentially written by a ChatGPT or something similar. But if we do that, and that's a question that was in the chat, if that's one of the possible directions moving forward, what does that mean for data security? What does that mean for the ways in which those sets of data may be used in the future by other AI LLMs or AI tools? Yeah, Baron, I think if you can give us a non too technical answer to that.
Well, I mean, that is my major research at the moment is on what we call distributed learning. Eh? So the last 5 keynotes I gave had as a title, Stop Data Sharing. Because if you talk data sharing to people, they always think I sent my data physically somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So in the COVID time, we had Vote on Africa, where we have 88 hospitals in Africa that keep their data where they are, and you can visit them with the algorithm. That's, for me, a much more important, a positive effect of AI, of algorithms, than the whole LLM stuff. It's exciting, but not a game changer. I think the game changer will be that there is no reason anymore to move data around. They stay under the control of the custodian, even myself in my personal health environment, whatever, and algorithms that are infinitely smaller than the data. The data in my field are frequently petabytes or, even more. They stay where they are. The algorithms visit the data, and you decide what access you give for which questions to which data. That is now swarming the world. There's Nature paper after Nature paper coming out. There is hardly any question that cannot be answered by distributed learning, meaning that the data are so much safer, and it solves 90% of the GDPR problems and the bias and the inequality problems, because data should never leave the country.
Yeah, thank you very much for this, Berend. I invite once again the participants, the audience, to look at what's the very active chat and resources that are being shared there. Colleagues, we have 3 minutes left for this panel, and I would like to take us back where we started with JC's Bergenmann's blog piece of May, where he was calling for regulation. And I would like to ask you what kinds of regulations in your mind, and on the basis of the discussion that been discussed, we've just had, I'm sorry, what kind of regulations, what areas of regulation, what types of regulation would you think is necessary for science to thrive in an era of AI? And please, no more than 30 seconds per people, so that we can go around the table. Ruth, do you want to maybe start? A good answer could be no regulation, but I mean, your thoughts on that would be appreciated.
Thank you. I'm fascinated by this issue of regulation because I think it is so multifaceted. I think there is clearly necessity for some regulation, but not so much that we stifle innovation. But at the moment, my view is that regulation can only deal with the intended consequences of good actors. It can't deal with the unintended consequences or bad actors. So that's the thorny issue in my mind at the moment.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you very much. Who wants to go next? Leslie, maybe?
Yeah, I would just add that, and this is a difficult and thorny issue, but I think that transparency is going to be crucial in this regard. That is transparency about the use of AI, as well as the getting away from, as much as possible, from the notion of the black box algorithm. And when AI is used, being as clear as possible in terms of what it's actually doing.
Thanks for this, Leslie. Chow Mei, can I turn to you?
Yeah, I think it is important to make it possible that people can repeat what is published. So there's a kind of reproducibility. Go along with the transparency and make it clear how others can reproduce the work.
Yeah, that's going to be central, and whether that's an area that can be regulated, that's going to be a critical question indeed. I think we have lost Nova. At least I cannot see her anymore. But Isuru, please, you have final thoughts on that issue.
Yes, I think the regulation is needed. The assurance of academic integrity is very important. So we have to put the regulation. I need, I think, regulations.
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot of countries, actors trying now to enter the sphere, framing the discussions as we're starting doing now, and trying to lining up a good set of actors wanting to, both from the private and public sector and policy sector, who wanted to collaborate on that. So that's definitely an area that we will continue looking at moving forward in the context of the work of the policy labs, at least. Colleagues, there's 1 minute left to this panel. Please join me in thanking our panelists, Izuru, Ruth, Xiaomei, Leslie, Baron, Nova, who's left, unfortunately. This was a very interesting discussion. I think the first in that context of several. There are a lot of issues that were mentioned and addressed today that I think would deserve a little bit more discussions moving forward. I would also like to thank the team at the Frontiers Policy Lab for organizing this exchange and for continuing organizing debates and discussions moving forward. So I thank you very much, and I wish you a very good rest of the day to all of you. Thanks, everyone.